And I was on the wait list at the end of the cycle. And I was like, nothing's going to happen there. That's a crazy competitive school. I'd never imagined myself here in a million years.
Talking about leadership of pre-meds, do I really need leadership? And for a school like this, that is a perfect example of why you need leadership. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Med School Years podcast. I'm Dina, and I'm here with my colleague, Carlos.
Hello.
And we're super excited today to be interviewing Cindy, who is an entering M2 at NYU Grossman School of Medicine. So thank you so much, Cindy, for being here today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I'm going to start off with just the wild question, right? Like NYU. For those people who are watching, quite possibly the most competitive medical school to get into was 2.5% acceptance rate for the class of 2024. These are stats on their website. The entering class for 24. Median MCAT 523, median GPA 3.9, only accepted 208 people out of 8,271 applicants. So well done, Cindy. How do you feel being in this competitive, thrilling environment?
I mean, it's been such a wild ride already. I've only been here for a year, but you can definitely tell the caliber of students that were accepted and also that the admissions committee put a lot of thought into creating a well-rounded community. I think all of us are such different people, but we come together in a really great way to make it not only a great learning environment, but also just a great community to thrive as medical students. So I think it's just been really awesome to like meet all these new people. And yeah, with the free tuition and everything, it's such an exciting time to just explore whatever you want to do at this school. And there's just so many opportunities that we've been given. So hopefully I get to make the best of it.
Let's talk about a little bit more about that sort of diversity composition. You're excited to meet new people. What has that been like for you? What are some of the things that you're noticing of your colleagues that you're like, wow, I met a new person. I didn't know that was like somebody that was interested in medicine.
Yeah, there's so many different backgrounds that are all coming together once you get to medical school. I feel like for me, coming from undergrad, I was like, oh, okay, everyone I meet in med school is going to be a biology major. We're all going to have like gone through the similar path to get here. But you get here and some people are coming from a military background or did like a couple of years abroad before they came back to medicine. Some people went straight through from undergrad, but in completely different fields like sociology or anthropology. And they're all coming together trying to bring like a new perspective into the field of medicine, which I think is really great because then you get to have all these conversations that you normally wouldn't have outside of that context that you're in with these new people. So
do you feel pressure as a student there? Like you mentioned the caliber, and obviously the stats don't lie, right? The caliber and the competitiveness of the student pool. Do you feel a pressure to like keep up with that? Or do you feel as though it's more of a collaborative environment where everybody kind of lifts one another up?
I would say definitely collaborative. However, of course, you're going to feel pressure. I think that's part of the medical student experience is you want to do the best that you can, especially like you said, we were selected, we were given this opportunity to come to this amazing school. Now it's like you have to make something of it and that's up to you. But I think the great thing about being in medical school is that once you're here, everyone realizes that like, oh, okay, like now we're all kind of in this together and we're not all going to be competing to get to the same spots. So it's better that we as a class are there to like you said, lift each other up. We study together, we help each other out whenever we can. And I would say it feels very different than when you're a pre-med. Because I think when you're a pre-med, there's like that sort of background competition in your head that, oh, we're all chasing the same med schools, and like we have to differentiate us from like our classmates. And I think in med school, that pressure goes away a little bit because you're not all going for the same specialties or you have different parts of your personality that you're trying to emphasize when it comes to like applying to residency whenever that happens. There is pressure there, but it's just a different kind of pressure than what you're used to in college, if that makes sense. So I think I really enjoy it so far in med school. I think it's such a collaborative atmosphere, honestly. And there really isn't that sense of competition, at least at NYU. And, I think for most med schools, from my friends at different schools, I hear the same thing. It's like once you get there, everyone's really, really friendly and just wants to help each other get through med school, before you worry about competition between your class.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah. Let me ask you maybe from a different lens and perspective. So there is no competitiveness amongst your colleagues, but do you feel that having pre-tuition brings an additional layer of potential? Like, I would say pressure from you got free tuition, like show us what you can do. Although unspoken, I can imagine that even if you're not told that there is this immense pressure, right, and pride of we're doing this pretty much potentially zero out of pocket. I'm not going to say that completely zero, but I would imagine that creates a pressure in itself for you personally and for all your colleagues, right? Like we're giving this opportunity. Can you talk maybe if there's a sense of that, especially at NYU? Because it's one of the few schools that's giving free tuition across the board. More likely you get like a year or a year and a half, right? But not full ride.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely, I would say like there is like pressure, but it's not coming from like our administration. It's more coming from ourselves, like me and my classmates, we do get these notices like, oh, do you guys want to say thank you to the donors? We'll have these ceremonies and they'll talk about how it's really important that we take what we were given and just realize like how grateful that we should be for this opportunity. So there definitely is probably a little bit of pressure in that sense. And you think anyone in med school in general feels that kind of pressure. We probably feel it to like a little bit more degree, but in general, you're like, oh my God, I've worked my entire life to get to medical school. Now it's go time. Now I better like hit the ground running, do everything I need to do, get to residency, make sure that I finish this out strong. So
I think it's one thing as a pre-med going through the application process to get that phone call, with an acceptance, right? It's such a life-changing moment. I remember making some of those phone calls when I was in admissions and I would shake, right? Because I'd be like, oh my God, this phone call could change someone's life. But then to get the phone call and hear it's free adds a whole other layer of I think gravity and excitement. Tell me what that moment was like, because you did really well in your application cycle and you had a number of schools that you could have chosen from, and you would have ended up fine at any of those competitive institutions. But when you got the phone call for NYU, tell me what that felt like.
oh my God, yeah. So it was kind of a funny story because I had already committed to a different school when I got off the wait list from NYU. And honestly, I had zero expectations. It was funny because NYU was one of my very first interviews, all the way back at like the beginning of the application cycle. And I was on the wait list at the end of the cycle and I was like, nothing's going to happen there. That's a crazy competitive school. I'd never imagined myself here in a million years. So I was like, okay, I'm committed to my other school. I'm really excited about going to med school and everything. And it was like one day in May. It wasn't a phone call, but it was an email. But I got this email. I was like doing dishes, like something completely mundane. And I just happened to look over it at my phone and I have an email from NYU Grossman School of Admissions. And I froze. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I read the beginning of the email, like the little message that happens. Yeah, I was like, I can't believe this. I was like, this is crazy. I never would have guessed. I think like that was one of the like defining moments. Like you were saying, it really, really did change my life at that moment. I was like, this is everything I could have dreamed of and more. I called my mom. She was freaking out, the whole thing. But yeah, no, it was really, really so exciting because obviously like this is such a dream school for me, for so many people that yeah, yeah, it was just a crazy ride. But I'm glad that I'm here. Wouldn't change it for me.
I think a lot of students don't realize, like going into the cycle, that there is a lot of waitlist movement at every school. It's very different from like undergrad admissions, because people give up the seat, you have to fill the seat. So even for schools like this, there's and there's hope.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't trust that. I was like, oh, the wait list won't move at all. Like nothing's going to happen there. But I kept my name on there because I was like, what's the worst that could happen? And then,
So talk about a little bit how you narrowed down your decision. You said NYU was your dream school, right? But you had multiple offers elsewhere. How did you, in essence, make that decision? Like, if this call comes in, I'm willing to let go of everything else and go here. Or did you, even in that moment, were so excited that you were like, but wait, I really have to think about what decision I'm going to make. If you could share maybe your thoughts and process behind that.
yeah, definitely. Obviously, like in the moment, because I was so caught up with everything, I was like, oh my God, NYU free tuition. I get to go to New York. That's like my dream. I've always wanted to do this. But I did have a really good offer somewhere else. And I really like got attached to that school because, like up until that point, I received that school's offer at the very beginning of the accepts like mid-October or something. So up until that point, this has been like, what's that? 6 months or like half a year of like thinking I'm going to this
Wow.
school and really loving it. I went to their second look. It was a great time. And so, yeah, at that point, I really did have to sit with my decision. Like, am I going to give up? I like was about to sign a lease for the school, like I had everything prepared. And I think ultimately I had to make a decision for where it came to school fit. And did I see myself having the same resources and opportunities at a school like NYU in a city like New York? That was like also a big factor, not necessarily the location, but just how many hospitals we had access to, the different kinds of patient populations that you see here. That's ultimately what I felt like brought the decision to a head for me was, can I get the best medical school education possible at NYU versus my other choice? And ultimately, yeah, I decided that NYU was the place for me. So
Is one of them home? Could you consider home like a decision that you had to make?
when you say home, like,
And was it like your home institution when you would consider like, this is home, I want to stay here, and that you opted out to go to New York, or is New York home for you?
oh no. So my home institution was Maryland, and I did receive an acceptance from Maryland, but I'd been in Maryland for undergrad. So I went to University of Maryland for undergrad. I grew up in Maryland. So at that point I was like, all right, it's time for me to like get out of the state for a little bit. So I was choosing between NYU and Michigan, actually. So
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you for that transparency. And let's talk a little bit about Maryland, because I think that Carlos and I work with a lot of students and parents in particular who are like, I want my child to go to a really competitive medical school like NYU. And that means they need to go to a competitive undergrad institution like a Harvard, like a Yale, like a Princeton. Then you went to a state school. You graduated with a degree in bioengineering, like no big deal, right? But you went to a state school and you maximized the opportunities that you had there. Like your undergrad experience didn't have to be at a top tier school. You talk to me a little bit about that, because I think that it's a big misconception for a lot of families that in order to get into a med school like NYU, you have to have come from a really elite competitive institution.
yeah, definitely. One thing I will say starting off the bat is that my class is definitely not just from the Ivy Leagues. Like we have our Ivy League students, but we have so many like state schools or other universities. Like they really do a good job, at least at NYU, of like making sure there's a mix of people from different backgrounds coming from different institutions. So I would say to any parents concerned, like don't write off anything. The med school application process is so confusing and so complicated that you never know what might happen. What I'll say from my college experience was I tried not to think about how competitive I was going to be against other Ivy League students, because at the end of the day, I can't do anything to change that. Like I'm here at my school. I love my school. I'm not going to go anywhere else. The only thing I can do is see what I can do at my own institution to, give myself the best chance when it comes to applying to med school. And so for me, that meant digging into my passion for engineering, actually. And so a lot of what I did in college was my extracurriculars. I was a part of this organization called Engineers Without Borders, and I ended up being super involved. I was project lead on this design project that we took to Uganda. And that took up like most of my time outside of school. And that's what I was like most excited to pursue. And I think that energy and that drive really showed in my application. That's ended up like being when I got interviewed, they would ask me questions about that experience because it's a little bit different than like a traditional pre-med path, I guess. But I would just say, like, in general, to answer your question, I think you can find opportunities like that at any school. And
That's right.
while of course I've heard these funny stories like from my friends who went to Ivy League, they have these crazy resources and like huge alumni networks, and that definitely doesn't hurt, right? But at the end of the day, if you go to a state school or if you go to an Ivy League school, there's going to be opportunities everywhere. You just have to find what actually excites you, and that will make you more likely to get farther in that area. Yeah. So I think that was my takeaway from college. Yeah.
You maximized it.
I tried.
I want to ask you a quick question about the Engineers Without Borders, but this is going to be like a two question situation. So now that you're in med school, you made it through, right? You're there, you're living life as a med student. Is it everything that you thought it was going to be? But also, if you could just talk a little bit more about the Engineer Without Borders and maybe help highlight, to your point, right? You don't have to do all these clinical activities to get to med school. There's all these other opportunities that you maximize. Maybe give us a little bit of info or background on this opportunity and how that has translated, maybe how you use some of the tools and skills within the classroom.
Yeah. Which one should I answer first? I guess your first question.
Sure.
Okay, let's talk about Engineers Without Borders because we were already on the subject. And then I'll come back to the second one. But yeah, so I got involved with it as a freshman in college. I was really excited about engineering in the beginning. So I was like, let me just join a club that's more engineering focused. You know, I have all these like bio classes and pre-med classes that I have to take anyways. Let me just do something outside of that for a little bit. And I ended up really, really enjoying it. The entire idea is that you partner with a community in need and you help them design an engineering solution to their problems. So our community, they had a school building that didn't have any electricity. And so we were helping them design a solar photovoltaic system to help power their school. So it was just that kind of engineering process that drew me to it, where you start from the assessment of the problem and then you design and then you test, redesign, and then implement. You know, it was very satisfying to be a part of that from start to finish. And then eventually to take that project over, you know, and really like go into the community and see how you could help them best and how you could make a sustainable solution for them. That was really, really the proudest moment of my college career, is when we went to Uganda and like finally got to install the system that we'd been designing for so long. Yeah, that was just really amazing. And I think that when it comes to translating into medical school, you're not really going to see any like direct translation of like skills. Like I wasn't really building engineering systems in medical school, that though you could, I'm sure somebody could find an opportunity to, but it's more of, I think, the thought process behind engineering that I really appreciated.
Wow.
When you come to med school, it's like that sort of problem solving and thinking about the big picture that I really take into my approach to med school. I probably am someone that could be a little bit more detail oriented. I'm way more of like a large scale 30,000 foot thinking person. And I think that that comes from like my engineering background. And that's how I approach a lot of problems in med school too, is, you know, if I'm approaching a new concept, let's think like we're learning about like cardiology. I'm like, let me back up and think about the physiology of what's happening, what makes sense for your body to want to do to keep your heart pumping. And then following that workflow is how I come to my understanding of like how this one specific principle or how this one variable fits into the equation. Does that make sense? So I think like that's sort of how I approach it. Really do want to bring more engineering into medicine, and use it more day to day. But I think that'll come with time. You know, like right now, I just finished my pre-clerkship curriculum. So that was more just like lectures in the classroom. And I'm excited to see if I can bring some more of my like engineering knowledge into clerkships once I'm like on the wards in the hospital. But yeah, really interesting.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then, oh, sorry, it was,
No,
can you repeat the other question again? Was it just like,
Yeah. Is it everything you thought it was going to be, right?
Right.
Statement to get there.
Yeah, I loved first year of med school. It was honestly one of the best years of my life.
That's
I tell this
awesome.
to people and they're like, aren't you like super busy? And I'm like, yeah, but it's like fun. And like finally, like you're here, you're doing everything you wanted to do. And at least at NYU, our classes are not mandatory. So my schedule was whatever I chose to make it. And first year is all pass fail, which is great. And it's definitely something that whenever I see new first years, I'm like, take advantage of the pass fail, use this time
Takes the
to,
pressure off, right?
yeah, take the pressure off. And also it gives you time to like explore other things, to shadow different specialties, to, get involved with the community. Once you get into like clerkships, you're probably not going to have a ton of time to do all of that. So first year is a great time to like take advantage of that. But no, it's been amazing. I've been having a great time. I'm going to miss first year, but
You're where you're meant to be, for sure. You mentioned earlier how, and keeping it on topic with your engineering experiences from undergrad, you mentioned how they were topics of conversation in your interviews. And I want to
yeah.
talk a little bit about that because NYU does MMI, that's their format, multiple mini interview for their interview day, which is a little more complex than a traditional interview. But I remember you practicing a lot for your interviews and you killed it. You really killed you.
Thank
You
you.
had such a fantastic grasp on delivering information and being personable. Can you offer any advice for those students who are just about to enter interview cycle and offer any tips?
Yeah, for sure. I really like interview season was like exciting for me. And then the more interviews you do, kind of you get the hang of like the process and you really start getting into the flow of it. I will say that like MMIs for me were my least favorite. It's hard for me to like be like
Foremost.
on the ball in like such a short period of time. It's like so much pressure every time you like switch you from room to room. So I think that definitely got to me was when I was doing the MMIs. There's like a whole different ball game. But in terms of like a traditional interview, I think definitely the most important thing is just to be as relaxed and as comfortable as you can be, because I think that really comes across when you're sitting across from like an interviewee is how nervous they are or how like uncomfortable they can be with the situation. I think that the body language of that reads. And so the more that you practice, I feel like even like with the new Zoom format, it might be easier to practice because you just like put on like Zoom and then just yourself. And then you can like record yourself and like watch yourself back, which I know sucks. It's horrible. But sometimes you gotta do it just to yeah, just to see like how you interact and like does it feel natural? Does it come across as natural? Because I think that's what really connects with an interviewer is like, is there a human behind that screen that I can relate to, that I can see at my school, and I can imagine passing in the hall and saying hi to? I think that's really what comes across and what gets you in that door so that someone can vouch for you in the admissions process.
I think that's great advice, especially with engineering students, because I think that a lot of engineering students think so technically, like so STEM heavy, that sometimes the humanism, like the human aspect, does not come through. And I think that being authentic and reminding admissions that you are human is a big part of interview day. So thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. And then the MMI, I think, is like I said, completely different. It's just like you really have to be prepared for anything that they throw at you. And I think that it's less of being personal. Of course, you still have to be personable, but it's really like such a short amount of time that you need to just, they give you time to prepare. So you have to be able to like collect your thoughts really well and just practice a whole bunch with every different kind of concept that you can imagine them asking. So that when you're there on interview day, like the worst thing that can happen is you're completely caught off guard and you're freezing. You're like, I don't know what to do. Anything else, like as long as you just talk, like they're still people at the end of the day. Like they understand. I'm sure they see this all the time. So, I think once that comes across and they can see again that you're relatable and that you are trying and that you're invested in this process, I think that really, is a good sign for them.
Thank you.
Have you put those interview skills to practice again in med school? Have you had any interactions where you have to do? I mean, a lot of patient interactions, even standardized patients, are all about asking questions and interviewing. Have you done anything of that now that you're in med school?
Yeah, we have our standardized patients and we've been practicing with those. I really enjoy those experiences. As I took a gap year after college, I was working as a medical assistant at an ophthalmology practice for a while. And so I've had some experiences with patients and it just felt like really natural coming into med school. So I think that like now that I'm getting more of like a background on what is a physical exam, what do all these things that I'm testing for actually mean, it just makes it all the more exciting and all the more realistic. to be able to apply those in real life. But I think that interview skills are it just depends. Like the more you do it, the better you get at it and the more comfortable you're going to be. And I think that the more comfortable you are, the more comfortable your patient will be to have you as their provider, right? Because if you come into the interview and you're like tensed up and you're nervous and you're like reading from the board, that's going to make them nervous too, right? And so if you just practice a bunch and just, again, try to be a person at the end of the day, I think that any patient really will appreciate that. And so that's what I've been trying to emphasize more is, yes, have the knowledge, have the foundations, but at the end of the day, you're sitting across the room from a real person and think about their humanity as a whole before you think about just their medical problems.
Thank you.
Has there been any other engagements in med school? Did you have you become involved in any other groups or activity? What are some way that you've kind of made your mark so far during your time there?
Yeah, definitely. So I think NYU is a little bit unique in the way that we do clubs. Basically, we have all of like the student organizations, and then everyone in the class is like automatically a part of all the student organizations. Like we get emails from every single club. And what happens when you first come in as a first year is a little bit like of a shock, but you immediately start the leadership transition. So whoever was leading this club is just now going to have the first years that are coming in take over the club and host different events. That's sort of bringing the class together. Yeah, it's kind of a shock when you're first like getting used to it, but then you work with the flow. And so I lead oncology club, and that's what I'm interested in. I want to do radiation oncology. And so I figured this is a great interest group for me to get involved in. And basically what we do is we host some events that help students get involved with oncology and kind of understand the different paths that it takes. So we did a couple events this year. Some of our favorites were the mock tumor board that we held. So for those that don't know, like a tumor board is just when a bunch of different interdisciplinary doctors come together to discuss cases of patients with cancer and discuss like how to go about treating them. And so we had a pretend one. We had a pretend learning case that we had a panel of doctors from different disciplines. It was a lung cancer case. So we had like a thoracic surgeon. We had a pathologist who specializes in lung cancer cases, a radiologist, radiation oncologist, and a medical oncologist. And they came and they all offered their like different perspectives to that case. And that was a huge success. A lot of our classmates really loved that. And then we had another event where it was talking about community oncology. So specifically because we were thinking we have a lot of this education on academic medicine and what it's like practicing medicine in a hospital. But what is it like practicing oncology in a rural area where you might not have access to like these huge, massive research institutions? How does that differ? How does your clientele change? So yeah, it's like a little bit of that. And then outside of organizations, my primary involvement has been in research. I'm somebody who enjoys doing research, and I'm really excited about the kind of research that's going on at NYU. That's another reason why I was drawn to come here. So I knew that I wanted to get involved as early on as possible. I know that research is not for everyone, and I have so many friends who like absolutely despise research, and they're like, as soon as I get to med school, I'm going to stop doing research completely. And that's completely an option too. So I think it's just like your path, like whatever you want to make it once you get here.
Carlos and I are both like, president, yeah, get rid of that. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Or
It's
at least like
becoming
there's some
nothing.
research that's not like it's completely clinical. Like some people can do public health work or
Yeah.
social research or anything. It just might not be like wet lab on the bench kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think unfortunately research is something that has now become the norm in residency, given it's sort of a cause and effect, and we can have a 2-hour conversation about this of step one going past fail, right? It was a metric to measure, and now it's like, well, we need something else, and now there's this pressure of it's not step, now amount of publications and research work that you do. So I think everybody is in the rush to do it. But to your point, it's not about wet lab research or directly related to whatever specialty you're going to pursue. It's just the idea that you've been engaged in research and know how to do research and understand research from I'm fascinated at the fact that you're already exploring, right, what this is going to be. Is radiation oncology the only specialty that you have an interest, or are you exploring other things as well?
Yeah, so I came into med school thinking that I was going to do radiation oncology. It like stemmed from back in medical school, like in undergrad. I knew that I wanted to like work with cancer patients, but up until then, like the only thing I knew was medical oncology. And once I did some more medical oncology research, I was like, I'm kind of not really interested in like the super specifics of signaling pathways and all of that jazz. So I went to my mentor and I'm like, I don't really know if I'm like completely satisfied with the kind of research that I'm working on. Do you have any advice? And luckily I was close enough with this mentor and she was just a really, really great person. So she said, have you ever considered radiation oncology? Like you have this background in like physics and you like that kind of stuff. Maybe just go shadow and see if you like it. And I had never heard of it because it's like a tiny field. But I went to go shadow a radiation oncologist. And when I shadowed, I was like, yeah, I can see myself doing this for the rest of my life. It was really just like that felt like it.
Wow.
I've continued shadowing in med school. I've worked with my like radiation oncology department to do research. And so far, my mind hasn't been swayed. But there's lots of other things that I'm interested in. And I'm excited to like see what that's like going into clerkship year if my mind does change. But so far, it's stayed with Rad Onc. Yeah.
I was studying and working on some other stuff, and just to give you an idea of how competitive this specialty is, there's only 7 programs across the country. I think last year there was 156 applicant, and I think there's only like, I don't know how many spots.
That's like really, really niche.
They're
So,
small.
yeah.
Yeah.
Small.
It's probably like 12 spots or something like that across the country in those programs, I think. But yeah, it's a super competitive process. It's awesome. Is the connection to oncology a personal connection, or you just have a fascination for the field? Like, what is the...
Yeah, that was personal. That's like how I got into medicine in the first place was we had a death in the family from cancer. And so that's how I was launched into this path to begin with. And then, everything sort of followed from there.
And I think that's the other part of the career exploration process, right? Although you have this idea, like, this is what I want to do, to your point, like you went this way and you're like, this is really not what I want to do. Although I have a connection to it, I want to do these other things. And it's something that I think even medical students, I've worked with medical students, struggle sometimes to identify what they want to do. Just in this, they think that this is the only path, right? But there's multiple paths, even to getting to radiation oncology. I'm sure there's different paths that you can take to get there. So, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, definitely. Like there was this advice that I've received from so many doctors and physicians. It's like, it's good that you know what you're interested in, but don't close yourself off, like leave the doors open. You're only a first year in med school. Like there's so much time for you to decide and figure out what you like. And so definitely I still have my options open, but
I want to go back to something you mentioned with the last few questions about leadership, because you said with the organizations and clubs at NYU, you lead the radiation oncology, right?
yeah, the oncology interest.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that it's difficult sometimes, and I know Carlos can probably agree with this, in talking about leadership of pre-meds when they are putting together an application or preparing for medical school. Do I really need leadership? And for a school like this, that is a perfect example of why you need leadership. You need to know that students who are walking in the door have leadership abilities and skills so that you can take over groups and organizations like this, right? Nobody wants to teach you leadership when you walk in the door. So do you feel as though your experiences in leadership as an undergrad really prepared you for that?
Oh yeah, for sure. It was like, I think having the like the drive and the motivation to become a leader. I think that like that really is something that med schools look for and should look for. It's because I think like everybody has the ability to lead, but it's really, are you passionate enough about something to want to take that responsibility on? Because really, when you become a leader of an organization at your undergrad, whatever it is, for me, that was Engineers Without Borders, you're not necessarily getting any like compensation or anything for it. It's really just for the love of the game. Like I'm here because I want to put my effort into this. I would rather be doing this than homework for other classes at some point. And I really care about the organization and I care about pushing it forward, making sure that it lasts when I'm gone. So I think that's like the characteristic that really shines through in terms of these leadership activities. It's not so much like, are you a natural leader? Because not everybody is, but do you have the drive and the grit to get to that point and to take on and like bring up other people? Because if you could do that in undergrad,
Yeah.
then hopefully you can keep doing that when you're a medical student. And I think that's what they want to see.
I agree. And I think that so many students always ask, like, what's the X factor to get into a school like NYU or Stanford, right? And just in conversation today, you can tell how you have qualities that rise above, like the drive, the motivation, the academic ability, the scientific inquiry, your curiosity, like you just it rises above the basic and the checking the boxes. And I think that that's really important for students to hear because you have to work cool. You have to love learning.
Yeah, it's just so hard because like so many, yeah, I think like it's so difficult to hear like as a pre-med because everybody is
I
so
know.
amazing. And like once you come to a school like NYU or like any other med school, you're like, oh my God, everybody is incredible in their own ways. And it's just like it's so hard because everybody deserves to have a chance like this and to go to school that can give them those opportunities. And so really like unfortunately, it's just because it's so competitive that now
It's
you have to
competitive.
keep outdoing everybody else. So I think it's like as much whatever you can do to get here and just working with really, really great mentors like Dina along the way really helps me. So
Thank you.
So no pressure. I double checked. There's only 12 positions offered across the country for radiation
No pressure.
oncology.
yeah, no, exactly.
But just FYI. So what's next for you? I know that you're wrapped up year one, but what's sort of coming in the future for you in terms of curriculum academics?
Yeah, so we're done with pre-clerkships. NYU is just 1 year preclinical. And then we have clerkships coming up. So that's going to be my next year. And then after clerkships is when I'm going to be taking my board. So the way that I'm going to do it now is I take step 2 first because that comes right after clerkships. And that's the one that's graded. So it's like the more important one now. And then once I take step 2, then I just take step 1 after that. Hopefully pass, everything's fine. And
So you're flipping them. You're flipping.
yeah, yeah. Which is like something that more schools are doing now because step 1 went pass fail. But also some students in my class are also taking step 1 like this summer after their first year to like get it out of the way and then they can focus on step 2 later. So I think it's just like up to whatever you feel is best for your schedule and how you operate. But so now interestingly about NYU is we're technically fully a 3-year MD program now. So everybody graduates in 3 years. You have the opportunity to add on an additional year. You can either do research or you can get like a second degree, or it's like MPH, MBA. But in general, everybody can graduate in 3 years. So I think like I'm probably going to end up either graduating in 3 years or taking a research year just because, you know, I want to have the best chance of like matching into a competitive program and everything. So, but yeah, lots of decisions to be made down the line.
It's interesting. 3 years. I wonder how. Well, I just wonder how ACGME or residency programs see that. Right. I'm looking at a 4-year student versus a 3-year student. Although I'm sure they didn't minimize what you do in school, but I think a year does change a lot the perspective of somebody. I think even Dina and I have even had conversations with BSMD students, right, that go from 4-year, 3-year, all of that stuff. It's an interesting sort of, I would say, conundrum that folks put themselves in, or that it has created other questions of are they prepared, not prepared. But it seems like you're going to do the extra year, so it's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think like something that's special about the way that at least my class at NYU is, and like a couple of the other classes, is a lot of people came in with like knowing what they wanted to do already. And I think that draws us to NYU because it's a 3-year and because if you're coming in with this idea of, I know I want to do pediatrics or I know I want to do this specialty and like this is the fastest way for me to do it. Like I'm just going to hit the ground running and start doing research in this field that I love already, then maybe that's just like a faster way for you to get into residency, become an attending and everything. So I think it's like a cycle of this kind of school attracts that kind of students.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cindy, how has been transitioning to being a New Yorker? You are from
That's
there,
so fun.
right? What is it like living in this city with such diversity, different populations? And tell me what it's been like to live in New York.
I love it so much. I've always known that like eventually I wanted to move to a city. So this was like the perfect opportunity to do that. And I think, like I said, first year you have so much flexibility that you really get the opportunity to like explore the city, figure out what your favorite places to go are. And luckily I have like friends who have already been in the city for a while. So those people really helped me like get adjusted, and it's great to like be surrounded by a class that also wants to have fun and like enjoys different parts of the city. Like it's just been a really great time. And I think that like because it's so huge and because there's so many opportunities, like everybody can find something that they enjoy, even if like I have friends who are coming from like super rural areas and they're really enjoying the city now and they're like, this is great.
Culture shock.
Yeah, yeah. But you really do get used to it. And I feel like the city is as big as you want it to be, or it can like you can make it really small, like have your circle and like be really tight knit in your community. But to your point about the diversity, that's one of the huge selling factors for me for coming here was just we have such a good mix of hospitals where you can train, where you have completely different patient populations. We have like a primarily teaching hospital, like NYU's hospital. We have Bellevue, which is like the community hospital, and that's like a whole different kind of population where you get to serve the underserved. And then you have the VA, which is that's its own thing. And so just sort of that diversity of like teaching and learning experiences is what I'm really excited about going into a clerkship year. So,
That's amazing. I feel like
Yeah.
you landed where you're meant to be.
yeah, I really do think so. I think that's the great thing about the whole med school application process is like eventually everybody gets to where they need to be.
Yeah. As we wrap up your time here, I like to end it a little bit on sort of maybe negative information, knowledge, things that you would share with somebody that is about to begin medical school that probably has already started these last couple of weeks, or is on this journey to enter medical school. Like, what is one piece of wisdom you would share with them?
Yeah, I think definitely what stood out to me coming into med school was like there's definitely a culture shock of like, oh my God, all of a sudden I come into this med school and everybody's already doing like 400 Anki cards a day. And like, I haven't even figured out what Anki is. Like, what are the settings that I'm supposed to use? You know, you do feel like you're always a little bit behind. And I think that like that's natural. And you really just have to like learn to be comfortable with that feeling and realize that you're not going to be like the best of the best, unless you are, in which case, good for you. But once you're in this sort of atmosphere, you really just have to like let it work for you and take your own time to figure out what works best. I would change my study strategy in between every single block because I was realizing that like something I was doing here wasn't working. And I would look over and like my friend's doing something completely different. And like in the back of my mind, I'm like, should I be doing that too? But you know, at the end of the day, like I was doing what worked for me at the time. And if it made my like score on the test a little bit lower than usual, I'm like, okay, well, I tried it, didn't work. Let's move on to something else. But I think just like getting accustomed to not always being right is normal. And I think that like first year students really have to like get used to that. And even maybe if you were at the top of the class in undergrad, you might not be that way anymore. And so just learning to be okay with that and being okay with trying your best and your best not always being that like that comes out as like a 100% in your test. But I think it's like it's a really great time for you to learn who you are as a student and who you like, what kind of doctor you want to be, not just like in a specialty sense, but what kind of approach do you want to bring to learning and teaching medicine?
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's that learn who you are, right? Not just as a professional, as an individual, but how you want to approach life. I think moving forward, you guys, as medical students, I think have been awarded the opportunity to do so much good in society. I think we look up to physicians with a very different lens, and I think that's why there's a lot of emphasis on all of these skills and attributes that you must bring to medicine. So it's just excited to hear where you're going, what's going to happen. Hopefully we can circle back with you and see where you're at in maybe 3 years. Or maybe after you take step 2 and 1 in that order. I'm just fascinated at the fact that you're like picking such a competitive specialty and taking this opportunity. And I think you represent the embodiment of somebody that chose a school because they saw themselves there, but they also see the school within themselves, right? all of the
Yeah.
attributes, everything that they're looking
Well,
for. Give for sharing your story with us. We'll reach back around. We wish you luck as you transition to clerkships.
Thank you so
Keep us
much.
posted. Keep us posted.
Thank you.
Thank you.